the variant readings and consulted with various oracles in order to understand what the text says. I've once again sent you the link in the chat of the Google Drive. I have a request that people don't send me chats in the middle of the class because it's very distracting. It's like shouting out in the middle of the class, okay? If you shout out, I can silence you. The chats jump up all the time and it's not helpful. We'll wait another minute. I see Roman, I see Tai, Anna, Maria, the mysterious TA. I can't guess who that is. Sophia, Hagai, Katerina and the waves. Kirill is with us again. Okay, I think we will maybe start. Just when to know anyone else is knocking on the door. I don't hear that knocking on my door. Okay, so let's see what we have here. We have selections from the Rahmi, and again, if you look in the box, they gave you a link. You have two versions. You have a version of Lidzbarski's translation in Hebrew letters, and you have the version based on Drau's collection in Latin letters. So we read about Miriam yesterday, and today we're going to read a little bit about, we're going to try and finish this poem, and then look at a magic text, okay? Emiliano is with us. It's not quite Ostroh, but at least we're together again. Those who were fortunate enough to go to Ostroh. Okay, so I'm trying to remember where we were. Here, we were about here in this text and here in this text. And I told you that the problem was that the text here, I think we're in the first version round. Here, Ramith, Rami. And some of the texts read Ramith and some of them Rami. We got up here, Ikum, let me stand, and usually the prefix tenses have some kind of, they have a kind of modal expression. Let me, I would like to, not simply future tense. Ikum ishtayille mindam biridfun kulhun almi. And the ridfun has to be they pursued me. The un ending is not generally used as a third person plural. The ending is 0. The un is used as it is in Babylonian Aramaic instead of uni. The final e vowel of the pronoun has been apocopated, and therefore ridfun is they pursued me. And again, if Eleanor were here, I'm not sure if she is here, we would need her to give us the Swedish u so that we can place it at the end to show that the vowel that's been lost. Ridfun, it comes from ridfunni, they pursued me. Wahaibene kushta, but here you see kushta is written with a kaf on the same rule that we saw yesterday, that two pharyngalized consonants will be dissimilated. The first one will no longer be pharyngalized. Either it will be ge or ke. Bnei kushta la hasrili. And we noticed yesterday that Lidzbarski suggested to emend, to erase the la, because he felt that it was it didn't fit in with the meaning. The meaning had to be my brothers fail me, not they don't fail me. And we'll see why when we read in what continues. Nfish al-maridfun wa haybni kushtala hasrili. Almi bavni righmun. And bavni here is be'avni, with stones. We still find avni, the word stone, in Mandaic. We have kifi, stones, but we do have avni quite often, meaning stones. Wahai b'minile shargazun. Minile is the plural of miltha. It's a form of mille words, but in Mandaic the plural is often mille, minille. So if we see the form manila or manili, it has to be a plural form. And just by coincidence, I read a little note on this morning for an article that's about to come out of a long lamella. I noticed that there wasn't a note on it, so I thought I'd better put it in. But Manila must mean her words. We'll see some lamellai today. Now, Drower reads here, my brothers were moved in words of anger thereat. But that can't be the meaning. Shargiz is to disturb. It's a shaf'il form from ragaz. It's transitive. And so Shargazun must be they disturbed me. As Lidzbarski, I believe, translated. Wahai b'manile Shargazun. Where are we? Number 10. Yeah, Zunten. They disturbed. Mich mit durchwühlt. Okay. So Lidzbarski here is correct. The brother's role in this story is negative and not positive. And therefore, he felt it necessary to amend the la, because it's very difficult to explain how la hasri, which would be they do not fail me, fits in with they angered me. And then we have another expression that's a little difficult. Illa da'athi marai. Illa here, Drower translated, oh that. Illa could be rather, unless, imlo. El is illa in Hebrew. Illa da'athi marai, minnach mroma zakaya. Were it not that thy Lord were to come. All of this would happen, but my Lord will come. It could be conditional, or it could be unless. It could be contrastive. Unless my Lord comes, minnach mroma zakaya, from you, O victorious heavens. Rishai shqal min borkai. He lifted my head from my knees. And Drower translates it here as future. He will lift. But we can say it's volative. As many of you may know, in Arabic, prayers and requests are often expressed in the past tense rather than the future tense, or in the imperative. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. May God pray for him and he be well. So it's quite possible here that that's the meaning too. Ukappar aini min dimihta. And we saw dimihta being dim'a, where the ain has shifted to hey, as we also have occasionally in Babylonian Aramaic. Kanpe dimli hizdi, my lap that was full of ignominies. And here we have the ignominies again, the lovely ignominies. Where are we? And again, we have Drower's interpretation being, I went down and I came up again. I do not think that that's correct. So I'm actually say Kamid, which Ushtayili, Mindam, the Rifun, the mem is written above the line. that could be significant or it could not be significant. Why could it be significant? Because in Neo-Mandaic, the form is minder, without the mim, as we will see maybe in the text that we're going to read when we get to a Neo-Mandaic text. So occasionally we will find, I mentioned to you in the copying, colloquial forms breaking through, and sometimes they're corrected by the scribes and sometimes not. But when we see something like this, where a letter has been omitted and then added afterwards, very often the original writing is a more colloquial form, and the later the corrected version is the more literary form. And there was an extra aleph probably to fill the line there. And here we have the repetition, alme bibni. And our main manuscript, which is, as I said, the earliest manuscript of Mandaic, reads here Babini, which is not a good reading. The Drama's manuscript, which is a couple of hundred years later, actually is a better reading. So even the earliest manuscripts are already contain quite a number of minor copying errors. In general, we don't really have a lot of time to talk about this, but in general, the textual tradition of the prayers is actually quite good. There are very few variants, significant variants. I'm not talking about orthographic variants, not even really linguistic variants, but in terms of text, there are very few variants. In my opinion, it's because the prayers were recited and they were learned off by heart. When we come to works like the Ginza, the only way to produce an edition of the Ginza Rabba is to use at least two manuscripts and produce a fairly eclectic text, because each of the manuscripts, each of the textual witnesses contains a significant number of textual errors that renders the text incomprehensible. But when you use, for example, the two earliest manuscripts, the Bibliothèque Nationale #1 and #2, you can actually put together a fairly coherent text because they belong to different textual traditions. And we find this quite a lot in Mandaic literature, that if we have more than one textual witness that belongs to a different textual tradition, it's usually possible to reconstruct something of the original text. But because the manuscripts are all so late and they're all so corrupt or all been subject to corruptions, you do need to use at least two textual witnesses to produce something of a coherent text. But in the prayers, it's actually a better situation than it is in the Ginza, which is the major canonical work. The Ginza, you cannot produce an edition of the Ginza of a passage of the Ginza without using at least the two major texts. And tacitly, this is what Lidzbarski did in his translation. He adopted readings from the two textual witnesses. And in fact, Petermann in his edition had already tacitly done that, in that he introduced readings from other manuscripts into his edition. We unraveled all of this when we did the edition for the Comprehensive Aramaic Lexicon, because we went back to the source materials and we were able to see where the joins were. And during the tagging, I read all of Lidzbarski's translation, and I was able to see where he had made use of the second manuscript. Lidzbarski was a great, great scholar, and his work is of enormous value. He was basically the person who laid the foundations for our interpretation of these texts after Nerlica, who had written the grammar. But without Lidzbarski, we wouldn't be able to move in Mandaic because the work he did on the Ginza is the foundation really of Mandaic philology in terms of the lexicography. So when he adopted the other readings, there were very good reasons why he did it. And in general, his decisions were extremely sensible and very understandable. Who said unto me? The brothers? Edilma bachit brak Kushta. Why weepest thou, daughter of Kushta? And Edilma is very frequently used in Mandaic as an interrogative particle. why. It moves from lest or perhaps to why. Simply marking questions. I said to you that questions are not required to be marked always in Aramaic, but this is one way of marking them. Dilma ba'chi brakushta, wa dimich ba'umbich natran. So dimich here is the plural of dimichta. The plural is dim'in, where the ayin is lost, but we don't have dim'in with a hey, dim'in. Ich, the feminine plural. Umbich, it's written here with the ayin, but the ayin is not pronounced umbich, but it's from ubba, the breast. Ayin bet bet. And the mem here is dissimilatory. Now, this is a phenomenon like the dissimilation of the two emphatic particle, the two emphatic consonants. This too is a phenomenon that is characteristic of Babylonian languages. It's characteristic of Akkadian, of Middle Babylonian too. So we find quite a lot in Mandaic that we will have a mem or a nun dissimilating gemination. Very, very common in this language. Yesterday I was dealing with the issue of Gabbarutha and Gambarutha, or Ganbarutha, which we find, both of which we find in Mandaic. And used interchangeably in some cases. An expression will appear in one text as Gabbarutha and another text as Gambarutha. I'm here. And dimihta is feminine. So even though dimich is not marked as a feminine plural, we have here the feminine plural participle, not ran. Middayadit uhrich. So up until today, the Mandaean word in Neo-Mandaic for path or way is uhra, ohra, ohro. And ohrich is your paths. And here we have a phenomenon that's extremely common in Mandaic, and that is metathesis. Unclear why. It's a phenomenon that's also common in Iranian languages. Whether it's contact linguistics that causes this, we don't know. But already in early Mandaic, particularly where we have laryngeals or pharyngeals, we will find, and reish, we will find metathesis. So orha, classical Aramaic orha, way is in Mandaic ohra. Midda yadit, thou knowest well, thou surely knowest. Knowing, you know. Midda is the infinitive. Yadit, you know. Ohrich. Mitrat stritza kudki. Your boundary stone is established. And the word kutka is a very strange word. Most scholars think it must be connected to the word kuduru in Akkadian, a boundary marker, but though nobody's quite sure why. What is the ik? Perhaps came through Persian with a diminutive ending. It's not clear. It's very clear that it comes with ohra, and it means the boundary stones, but nobody knows quite why. Between
Matthew?
the lanterns of light. Shlagha, a very Eastern Aramaic word. Den hora. Nidallun shragich. Dali, to raise up, like Shlomo's raised up his hand. So this is to be raised up. Nidallun. Dali also has the meaning to heal, but here that's not the meaning. But we see in a number of places, Dale means to heal, also in Babylonian Aramaic and in Mandaic. Basically, if you want to know Mandaic, you have to learn Babylonian Aramaic of the Talmud. And if you want to know Babylonian Aramaic Talmud, you have to learn Mandaic. The languages are so close and the usages are so close that, as I said, they're in some ways two dialects of the same language. They certainly stand in very close proximity, and to really understand Mandaic, you have to have a good grasp of Jewish Babylonian Aramaic, or certainly it helps, and to read Sokolov's dictionary closely, because you will find in the dictionary, because the lexicographical tradition of Mandaic, of Babylonian Aramaic, is much stronger than the lexicographical tradition of Mandaic, much more has been attested in Jewish Babylonian Aramaic than Mandaic. We'll come back to that in a little while. Maybe at the end, I would like to talk on the fourth day a little bit about the lexicography on which I've been working since 2009. So I have a little bit to say about it. If you've got 12 years to spare, I can tell you all about it. And here we have this help vowel again, ninihron instead of ninharun. Bezivrich wa'idanich sak, arise in thy time and season, in other words, at the goodly hour, hozyi le'afar nahor, and see, and here the E is the pronoun, and this is the only place where, as the third person masculine pronoun, where the original sign for hey survives. The original hey sign, symbol, has been lost in Mandaic. Mandaic uses for the ha, it uses the original het sign. So the double head is the double head of the het in the Southern Iranian scripts. And it's only the original symbol for hey has only survived as the third person masculine pronoun. It has some other uses in early texts. It's sometimes used to signify a final eval or eval. But otherwise, there isn't the letter hey in Mandaic. The symbol that was hey is never used. And Nahor is written nun het vav resh in Mandaic. But that het can also be hey, historical, etymological het, can be etymological hey. They've merged, as indeed they did in Jewish Babylonian Aramaic, and many of the Jewish Babylonian Aramaic texts also only use one symbol, although they generally use the hey symbol rather than the het. Although we do have some cases where het is used for etymological hey. Mishtayin hey zeki. Drower translates it's extolled. I don't know what etymology she gave this, if she thought it was from Shin Ayin Yod to speak. I think it's from Shin Ayin Ayin to be glorious. Wazaki Gavra das Lepo. And victorious is the man. Remember, I told you about the Gavra, the man. He's the messenger who brings the message from the other world about the reality of life, who brings the message from the world of life. Now, Shlomo wanted to say something, but we can't hear him because he's on mute.
Or no longer I'm muted.
We still can't hear you. I don't know why. You're muted.
How about now?
Do we have a lip reader here who can assist me?
I'm unmuted as far as I'm aware.
I'm afraid, Shlomo, we're not hearing you.
I can hear
Much as we'd
Shlomi.
love to hear you.
I can hear you,
we don't hear
Shlomi.
you.
We can hear you.
I don't know why.
Maybe.
Check
Can
your
somebody else
speaker.
speak and see if I've got sound, if it's me or them? Can you hear him?
No,
Anyone
we're
else hear him?
speaking right now.
Yes?
We hear
You're
him.
hearing
Yes.
him?
Yes, we hear him.
Oh, why am I not hearing? Wait a sec. So let me have a look if it's me. Okay. I was enjoying this. I was talking away to myself, not hearing anybody. I thought it was wonderful. Let me just see if there's a problem with me then. All right. Maybe my sound isn't working. Check my audio devices. I'm just going to check my audio devices. Hold on. It's leading me to my own devices. There's sometimes a problem with audio on Zoom. How do I find that here? 1 second. Mute. Hang on. Audio settings. Are you ready for this? Now I hear. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, let's try Shlomo again, please.
Okay.
Now I hear you. Sorry, it was my audio device needed a bit of checking.
Well, just a very far association. Could Kich, your boundary stone, be somehow related to Kad Kedin or Kad Kedaya in
Meaning,
Jewish Palestinian Aramaic?
sorry?
Or at least in Palestinian Jewish Aramaic. I don't know if it appears in other Aramaic dialects.
Meaning what?
But there it means precious stones. Perhaps related to Chalkidon.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, we have. I mean, it's a very mysterious word because it's known in its context, but we don't really know what the etymology is, and it hasn't been found elsewhere. So we're kind of stuck with what we have in this case. So I don't know. I don't have an answer. I know that you all would like to. So this is a challenge for you all to go off and find what the etymology. Can you see the text? Yeah, here's the text. Okay, so what we did in the last day and a half or day and a bit is we looked at a classical Mandaic text. Incidentally, I will try to share with you, if I can, a photograph. 0172. Let me see if I can get this photograph up for you and share it with you. This is the photograph of the manuscript we've been reading. Okay. You see this? And this is the oldest Mandaic manuscript, surviving manuscript. It says, Warda wa einich milie min shinton. Einich min shinton milie, ulevet gvinich shaharta. Amala, ha, train klata yomi, ahai levet av sharon. And here we have the aleph above the line. Hai sharon levet av, udrashi, ودراشي شاني القلايهن وقال دراشيون de something, so it's blocked by de uthri ahi shinta la'aini la'afia. So this is an example of the early script, and here you see the e. This is the old hey, which has survived at the end of the word for the third person masculine, and this is the het. Rah Mid, and here you see this is the dalet. He started to write Rahmith, and then he wrote above the line Rahmith. And there are a number of cases like this. Where the text has been corrected. It's a very small manuscript, extremely small case. So what I wanted to show you is, I told you perhaps I didn't put these texts together in the right order. Because what in fact we've done is we've started with in the middle with classical Mandaic. This is what most of the Mandaic texts that survive look like. They're written in a very plain orthography. They have quite a number of errors. They need to be corrected with other manuscripts. They are mostly, almost entirely of a religious nature. And they're written in a language that's very similar to the language of the Babylonian Talmud. But they also, as I said, contain a number of errors. I would now like to look with you at a magic text. At the end of the 19th century, the first Mandaic epigraphic texts were discovered, both written on led lamellae and written on the clay bowls. In particular, the texts on the bowls are well known because many of them have been published. The first text to be published on lead lamella was published at the beginning of the 19th century by Mark Lidzbarski, who did a remarkable job on it. Again, Lidzbarski published several bowls and Led Lamellae. We also have to mention, what was his name? It'll come to me. Who published a book in the 19th century on magic bowls. And these scholars did an excellent job considering the lack of knowledge that there was about this kind of material. It was completely unknown. So they managed to interpret them. Lidzbarski particularly did an excellent job. And but since over the last 100 years, many more texts have come to light. There are many that have not been published. There are, I would say, 3 times as many lamellae that have not been published than have been published. And I was fortunate enough to recently receive funding to work on these, and we'll be publishing quite a number of them within the next few years. A number of them are coming out now. One of them, the proofs went off today. Corrected proofs and a very lengthy text from the British Museum, and a large number of them are now waiting to be published, and we will know a lot more about them. So a few years ago, I started working on them in the hope of trying to make this material more available. The disadvantage of the epigraphic material is it's often broken, and it's very difficult to read. What you see behind me is the text we're going to be reading. And it's in pieces. If I show you a second. 1 second. I'll try to share this with you. These are the photographs I took in 2015, the second set of photographs I took. Are the photos moving? Do you see them changing, or do you just see the one? You see them changing? Okay, so these were the photographs I took in different lightings, different directions, to try to get as much of this out of this as possible. But the writing is so minuscule that you actually can't read it with the naked eye. So even though I had handled this material before, I had to identify the fragments by the photographs I already had, because they're too small to actually read with the eye. At least I can't. The letters are about 1.2 millimeters high. So I photographed them again and again and again, thousands of photographs of these texts, so that we could, oops, that wasn't in focus, so that we can see all the detail as closely as possible. These are in the collection of Martin Schoyen from Norway. And as you can see, you can get pretty good. This was done with a very simple camera and very simple lighting. But if you know how to photograph, you can get pretty good results of these kinds of things. As I said, the texts are absolutely minuscule. I couldn't read them without the photographs. So the fact that we're able to photograph them in high resolution and blow them up enormously larger than the original made it possible to do it. Now, obviously, if we had professional equipment and we're doing this in a laboratory, we could get even better quality, but I'm not certain how much that would actually make a difference. In most of the cases, if the text is damaged, it's damaged, and a slightly better photograph is not going to make a difference. What's going to make a difference is having another parallel, having another copy of it where we suddenly can see the parts that are broken. And you know, the words of Mandaic are rich in one place and poor in another. You have to as soon as we have several textual witnesses for these texts, we are able to usually understand the formulae. But for example, in the formula we're going to read today, this is unparalleled. There's no other copy. So where the text is broken or very difficult to read, that's what we have. Now, I've given you this text in 2 editions. I've given it to you in the Hebrew edition, which is the original version I published in memory of Yosef Nave, who was my teacher of epigraphy. I have to just find it myself. Here you go. And so this was the original edition, and share here. 1 second. I'm just going to make you all smaller so I can see it. Right. This is the original edition that I produced, and this was Yosef Nabeh, whom I had the honor of studying with, and this is the Hebrew version, and here you can see the alphabet, which is slightly different from the alphabet in the later manuscripts. Remember, these texts are from about the 5th, 6th centuries, and the manuscript is from the 16th century. So 1,000 years separate them, 900,000 years separate them. Nothing has been written up to date on the origin of the forms of these scripts. We're probably going to do something about this in light of the new materials that we have, the so-called Elamite materials that employ a very similar script, and they are unpublished, and I'm working on them with Professor Nicholas Sims-Williams of the School of Oriental African Studies. So this was the original version with a Hebrew translation. We'll be reading from this. For those for whom it's easiest to read the Hebrew, you're welcome to use the Hebrew. This is the Latin translation. There are some minor differences in the translation because in reconsidering it, I looked again at certain questions of what it means and came up with slightly different conclusions where the texts were difficult. We're always doing this and always revising our own interpretations in light of what we found. And again, when I come to discuss with you the lexicography at the end of the series, we'll talk about this a little bit, about the advantages of digital lexicography and being able to constantly revise your own, both your own findings and the findings of others. You discover that somebody misread something, you discover that you misread it, you discover that you read it correctly, but you didn't understand it correctly because suddenly we have another copy and it's clear that something that was broken, the context is broken, now we understand the context. So I regard it as a positive virtue in scholarship to be able to look constantly at your own material and be revising your own findings. So let's have a look at this. Now, what happens is because it's written on two sides of a lamella, and as you saw, the text is damaged. I'll just pull up again the photograph here. 1 second. So these are the two sides of the text here. Do you see this picture? I don't know if you're seeing the picture. Check.
Yes.
I'll check. Oh, sorry. If I don't get any feedback, I don't know. I like talking to myself because it's intelligent conversation, but it's sometimes helpful if I hear something. So this is side A apparently, and this is side B. As you can see, it's written on lead. So, but as you see, it's broken at both ends, and in fact broken in the middle. But the middle, the joint is very clear. So let's start reading. I have to get the text out. So the text breaks in the middle. This is an important point, that we don't have the beginning, we don't have the end, but we have the middle. And what I'm going to do with you is read a bit and try to explain, try to point out some of the things that are characteristic of Mendaic, but also some of the things that are characteristic of the epigraphic texts that are different from the later manuscripts. All right. So here we have Waqariya, and she cries out, Wa Amra Nafsha. And here you see again that the final ah of her is just written with Aleph. So for example, if we have a form like Malka, we don't know if it's the king or a king, because the definite article doesn't mark definite words. And what was historically the definite article no longer has that function. It's used the noun marker. But we don't know if it means a king or her king. Now, in the spoken Mendaic of today, there's actually a distinction between the two. There's nafsho and nafsha. It's a different vowel. One is the kamatz vowel, the o vowel, and the other is the a vowel. Whether that was the case in these texts, we can't know because they're written as homographs. So there's no way of knowing if they distinguish between them in pronunciation. What we do see is that sometimes they will use, as they used in Jewish Babylonian Aramaic, the masculine pronoun for the feminine. So sometimes you'll have the E for the A. Waqariya wa amra nafsha, ana he, and here we have hey yod, hey ayn yod aleph, which is quite common in these texts. Ana he, I am she, aqrai, and this is a strange word, mavakalta, it's some kind of demon, female demon, and we don't know what it is. It appears in Jewish Babylonian texts, it appears in Mendaic texts. I don't recall if it occurs in the Syriac text because I didn't look it up, but it probably does, and I think it does, and we just don't know what it is. Several etymologies have been proposed, none of them entirely convincing, persuasive, perhaps is the word. And a voice that is no voice, and her voice is like no voice, is of no voice. And this could be qala, her voice, the la qala is of no voice, is like no voice, is no voice. Charles has no voice. Who knows? The qala, the la qala. Qarya la nafsha, unless it's qala the la qarya, qali la nafsha. And a voice that is no voice calls to her or calls to itself, but the voice is masculine. And again, we cannot distinguish. Part of the problem is here we don't know what, if this is qari, it calls masculine, or qarya, she calls. They're homographs, and it's impossible to distinguish them. As I said, Nodika already noticed this in his grammar, that Ramya and Ramya, Rami and Ramya are homographs. It's probably Karina Nafsha, she calls herself. That's how I've interpreted it from the context. Midamya, and she appears. Actually, I've just come up with a new interpretation of it. I've just realized what it means while we're sitting here. It means she calls herself the voice that is not a voice. Okay? That's what it means. You can now correct the translation because that's what it means. Qariya nafsha, she calls herself. That she names herself. She calls herself the voice that is not a voice. Okay. There you go. I did tell you that these texts have, and I've been working on this text for many years. I did tell you that these texts work like this. You read them, and then you read a lot of other texts, and then suddenly you realize that from the context of how these texts work, what the correct meaning is. So I've just realized that this minute, while you've been sitting here, I've just realized what the correct meaning is. And this happens almost on a daily basis when you work on Mendaic. That you look at something you've looked at many times, and then suddenly, because you've seen other things, and there are other texts that say, that describe the demons, that give the name that they call themselves, you realize that that's what it means. Okay, so that was nice. That was rather fun, wasn't it? That's how it works. Umidamya, and she appears. And Middamya is the itpa'al, right? Middamya, leghuvri binshi. She appears to men. And here we have the distribution, which we have in a number of Aramaic dialects, of Gavra and Govri. Gavra singular, Govri plural. And she appears to men, binshi, as women. And in Mandaic, the word inshi, women, usually has a vowel, a prosthetic vowel at the beginning. Inshi, this occasionally occurs in the Jewish Babylonian magic bowls too. The nishi has become inshi, and it's written with a vowel at the beginning, with an aleph. It's not inashe, not men, or people, it's nshi. المدامية لغفري بنشي والنشي مداميالي لغفري. And here we have what we call a chiddush. Here we have a discovery that was first found in this text. When I was working on it in Germany a decade ago, we found this, and it was not previously attested. See if you can work out what it is. It says, Umidamya legovri binshi, she appears to men as women, and to women, midamyali legovri. Midamya, this is the verbal base, right? She appears. What is li?
To them.
To them. Correct. And what does it come from?
Is it a sort of ergative form that like vice versa objective relation?
It is the le. The le is the preposition. What is e? You have to remember two things. First of all, you have to remember that yod aleph at the end of a word in Mandaic is not necessarily ya. It's not liya. It's li. It's a digraph for the e vowel. And I've mentioned this to you, like dammi, hari. It could be liya, but it's almost certainly not here. This is why you need to know Babylonian Aramaic. And you need to know Babylonian Aramaic as it occurs in good Eastern manuscripts. Shlomo, you should know this because you published some nice fragments of Masechet Sanhedrin. Also, Psachim, we have this about the Qatte, about the Sakini.
Yeah, I admit that I would expect midam yalla again as an ergative structure.
No.
But it's not what we have here, obviously.
No. We have, so I'll read it again. Midamia lehovri binshi, she appears unto men as women, and to women, midamyali berovri, and to women she appears.
So li has to be a suffix that agrees with inshi.
Correct.
To be feminine plural.
Correct. So it's actually would be in Jewish Babylonian Aramaic, it would be lehi in good manuscripts, lehi, and it's an abbreviation or an approximation of lehin or lehen, depending on the dialect. So we have lehin, which in Jewish Babylonian Aramaic is shortened to lehi, and in good manuscripts of the Talmud we have the form lehi. Amar lehi, he said to them, Chaziali, Chazili, he sees them. But here it has been abbreviated even more to simply li. Now in Neo-Mandaic, the lehu ending, lehon, has been abbreviated just to u. So lehon in earlier Aramaic, which in classical Mandaic will frequently also appear as lon in classical Mandaic texts, in Neo-Mandaic is simply lu. I say lon, it could be lun. We don't really have a strong vocalization tradition for Mandaic, but it's lu. But the feminine plural, unto them, the women, has been completely lost in the spoken language. So this is a survival of a form that clearly exists in the spoken language of Mandaic, and it's entered the literary language of Mandaic. That lehin becomes lin, that then is shortened to li. But it is not found in any classical Mandaic text. If you look in Neolika, you will not find it. And this is not a criticism of Neolika. We have to understand Neolika's grammar, even Matsuch's handbook, are written on the basis of the text that stood at their disposal. Where will you find this? In Od Abu Draham's doctorate. which is at the moment in the form of a doctorate and is being prepared for publication, unfortunately only in Hebrew at the moment. I gave you the English abstract of his doctorate, where he lists the forms that he has encountered. So you will find it both in my articles, but also in his doctorate, where he's gone through and gathered up, and hopefully in the published book, there'll be even more examples. As we keep working on these texts, we discover more things. This is the great thing with Mendaic, is that the corpus was so unknown. I mean, for me, it's been wonderful because the corpus was so unknown when I started that it's literally every day you discover something. You discover a new meaning of a word, discover a new word, you discover new grammatical forms. There was an enormous amount to do, and it's been very exciting to work on this material because we will find this kind of thing. So as I said, this is an example of where the epigraphic materials preserve rare grammatical forms that were no longer used in the vernacular. Whether they ever occurred in the literary Mendaic texts, we can't know, because they only survived from the copies from the 16th century onwards. And it's possible that some of these finer points, some of these rare forms were sort of ironed out in the process of transmission because the copyists weren't aware of them. They didn't really understand them. So I mentioned to you that yesterday when we were reading the poems that there was a case where I thought it should be the feminine form and it uses the masculine form. So I don't know if that's because the person who wrote that poem you simply use the masculine forms because they were used interchangeably, as happens in many dialects. If Rania is here today, she'll tell you that many of the modern Arabic dialects, there's no distinction in masculine plural and feminine plural in the pronouns. In Syria, it's on. Up here, it's hom. I had students from the Galilee, and they said to me, "Oh yes, only the old women speak, use the hunna forms and the humma forms. Only they use them in the villages." So it was regarded as old-fashioned to use the survivals of the grammatical forms. So, hi Rania, yes, speak to us.
Yes, hello.
You know about this?
Yes, and
We've lost you. You're frozen, Rania. She was about to make a great point. Rania, we will come back to you. We'll come back to you, I promise. We've lost Rania. I don't know what happened. Okay, we'll continue a bit. Here we go. Okay, so they appear, and to women, they appear b'damawata sanyata, in odious, hateful forms, apparitions. Damawata is the plural of damuta. We also have a form damamata, where the wa is become mem, very Mesopotamian phenomenon. The famous Mar Heshvan phenomenon. But we have Damawata, and here we have Damawatha. And Sainata is a very Mendaic phenomenon where Nun Yod becomes Yod Nun. So Sanya becomes Saina. And then the text says, Wa'achla bni, and she eats boys. And we've added the flesh of, I don't know who put a blood of, it should be the flesh of. I know who did this, but I'm not going to say, doesn't matter. He eats the flesh of the children and drinks the blood of children, presumably. Eats children, Wahanka bni, and she strangles children. So this is an amulet for the protection of children, both born and unborn children. And this is extremely common. We know that child mortality was extremely common in the ancient world. We know that miscarriage is still a very common phenomenon in the modern world. Child mortality in the modern Western world is much less common, but miscarriages are still very, very common. So the protection of unborn children, it was regarded that the evil Liliths were jealous of the women and they would come and steal their children and eat them. And presumably the eating of the children reflected deformities of the children or of aborted fetuses. And so the idea was that if the children came out like this, either deformed or as aborted fetuses that were misformed, this is because in the womb they had been eaten by demons. So Achlivani was Shati Avani, and here you see Shati, it could be Shati or Shatia, but we know it's feminine. So I'm reading Shativani or Hankavani or Gatlavani, and she kills, and Gatla is from
Qatala.
Qatla, exactly. And here we have the same phenomenon that two pharyngalized consonants, the first one is dissimulated. We saw yesterday examples, and I can't remember what they were, and I promised, and then we saw Kushta today. So I can remember what happened in Babylonia 1,500 years ago, but I can't remember what happened yesterday. So you have to just put up with that. When Nasba or Shakva b'ni, she torments children. When Nasba b'ni livra, or livra Yahava. And she takes children, livna Yahava. And for some reason, there isn't a vav here, and she takes children and gives them to her children. Now, b'na here, what is the up here?
Her children?
Her children, correct. And it's definitely feminine. It definitely a feminine pronoun and not the historical definite article. And how do I know that?
We need to be bra.
Exactly. If it was her child, it would have to be bra. If it's her children, it's bna. Bra could be a son or the son, or it could be her son. But bna can only be her son, because the sons is bni. As soon as I add the pronoun, the A ending or E ending in Mendaic is lost, and it's directly connected to the nominal base, bna. So in Mendaic, yeah, Rania, I will come back to you. Bna, we lost you. And,
Yeah, the network, I'm sorry.
Yahva, and she gives them to her sons. And the fact that the order is changed, we have the, first of all, in all of this section, we have Wa'achlavni, Washatyavni, Wahankavni, Wagatlavni, Washatavni, Unasvarivni, and then Livna Yahva. This marks the end of a passage in the text. You change around the word order to mark that you've reached the end of a sense unit. So Rania, incidentally, Rania, if any of you tried to write to me yesterday, it just happened that yesterday they decided to shut down all of our university's computers for the entire day. So if I didn't answer you, it's because I didn't get the emails. I realized after I gave you my email address that, in fact, I wasn't going to receive any emails because they shut down the university servers for emergency maintenance. So Rania, what you were about to tell us all about the Hon and Hunne and the Syrian dialects and the...
Yes, because you said something that I don't know why you said it. You said that there is not a distinction in dialects between feminine and masculine plural.
In the Palestinian dialects, in the Palestinian city dialects, for example, their hand is idhum, idhum, whether it's masculine or feminine.
No, it is either. If feminine,
yeah, that's
it is
feminine sing. Yeah, but I'm talking about the plural. For the plural, there.
for the plural, idhum.
Right. You have ido or idu and ida, but for the plural, it's idhum or idum. But in and of course in the Syrian dialects, it's the in or hin. But in the village dialects of the Golan, they still, and then in the Galilee, they still do use the hom and hin, but it's only, I was told by my students, it's only the old women who use them.
Yes, this is about plural.
Yes, yes, the plural.
Because when it is singular, there is distinction
Right,
between
but in the
feminine and
plural, the distinction only survives amongst villagers, and even in the villages, I was told that in this generation, it's mostly women who, in traditional societies, leave the village less, who use the old forms, and the younger men regard it. This is what my students, when I was teaching in Haifa, I took many years, the students in Haifa, the Druze, and they said that the young men regard it as like embarrassing to use those because that means you're like a boy from the village. So you want to use the dialect from the city.
That's true. That's true because old people only still use this,
Yes.
and young people, of course, don't want to use this, of course. And you look like a guy from a village, and you're not.
Right. So
yeah, that's true.
Historical, the more, if you like, the more accurate, if you want to call it, the older, more grammatical forms are pushed out by the newer forms because they're regarded as old-fashioned. So it's quite an interesting socio-linguistic phenomenon that these dialect forms are slowly disappearing. I mean, we have the same in British English. We were reading Drower with her thee, thou, and thy. And those forms survived in British English up until the 1930s. They were used in spoken dialects. Today, you will be very hard pressed to find anyone who uses the dialect forms. So within living memory, there are people who grew up using these and they no longer use them. Because
but in standard Arabic, we still have this distinction, and it's
in standard literary Arabic,
we cannot touch it. No.
That's the strengths of standard literary Arabic is that the morphology has remained very stable.
Yes, very stable. Yes.
Arabic, if you like, in terms of linguistic stability, is actually in the morphology, where it's remained very.
Yes, but not only.
Not only, but not
only the syntax as well remain the same. If
you actually have mastery of it, I'm saying. If people actually know the syntax well, then it's fairly stable. But of course, but in written, mostly the morphology has remained stable. I'm going to bring us back, Rania, to the text. I just wanted to throw in that these phenomena that we see, this is very important. Phenomena we see in the ancient languages also are occurring in living languages all the time. So we are able to see that the same kinds of things that we find in these texts, and when we dig up these old texts, we find they were happening a long time ago, are happening in living languages. Okay, so we have here, Omitkaria Khiria Vashuka, and she's called Mishap in the streets. These are various names. Now, the naming of demons is a very important thing because if you know the names of the demons, and you know their various names, then you can act against them by calling them out through these magical texts. Omitkiria, and she is called, and this is classic Mandaic, where again, instead of having Mitkaria, we have Mitkiria. She is called for the Ifpa'el form. Qiria, Bashuki, and here we have the Ain used as an E vowel. Whether it's E or E, we can't know. Bashuki, Washikufta, Bene Biryatha, and Shuki and Biryatha are a word pair. The first person to identify this was Epstein in an article, which I can't remember whether it was published originally in Hebrew or in English or in German. I think probably I just can't remember. But Shuki Biryatha also appears in the Talmud, and Biryatha is originally Akkadian. And they're a word pair that appear in many texts in the Talmud, in magic texts, in Mandaic texts, the streets and alleys. So on the streets, she's known as Kiria and Shikufta. So although she's called mishap and affliction, the name, the illnesses actually are names of the demon herself. They are embodiments of this demon. Lich barazich nafshich qaritich. To you, with your own spells. And I see that somebody's going to be lecturing about Raza in Aramaic, and I don't know what he's going to say, but I can tell you it often has the meaning not of mysteries, it means spells in these texts. Now, what of course you want to do is you want to counteract the magic of the demons by using the very magic that they're using against you. So what you're essentially doing is you're saying, I know all your tricks and I can use them against you. So this is what happened here. Lich, barazich the nafshich tritich. I have invoked you or called you by your own spells. And here we have another name for this Lilith, Martinai, or different Lilith, Martinai, Lilitha, Harashta. Now, here we finally find an example of something I wanted to show you. You notice we have no aleph here. It's written Harashta, but the form is the Qattal form, Harashta, the sorceress. In Mandaic, in epigraphic Mandaic texts, the orthography is very different from the orthography in the later text, in that the aleph sign, the halka, is not used to mark every R vowel. Oad, in his doctorate and now in an article that's forthcoming, has written about this, and he has shown that in fact the orthography of Mandaic in the epigraphic texts is very similar to the orthography of Geonic texts, in that the aleph sign is really used for historically long R vowels. So Harashta, because you have the gemination of the resh, the first R is short, it's Harashta, and therefore it's not written. It's not they will never write it, but the tendency, unlike Geonic Aramaic, where they will never write that vowel short with an aleph. But here, the tendency in these texts is to use the A only as a long vowel, as of course is done in Arabic, in later Arabic. Yes, Rania.
I wanted to say something about, okay, yes, al, we use it like for the all the time. But we have two forms of al. We have when we sound al, and we have when it sounds ah. So we have two forms. Okay, what I want to say, when you say about the spells that I have called you, there is a Semitic thought, very, very, very ancient, that you can spell with words and not only spell. Right. You can give good things or bad things to someone by saying them. And even poetry, ancient poetry, it has been built on this principle according to Manai 2003. He said, and we still actually have this in our mind when I want to say, okay, our professor is absent. And I say, oh, I hope that there is a car that shattered him and he's dead. We think if something happened to him, it's because I said so. And my mother, when she wishes me good things, and she say, oh God, I wish for good things. And she thinks that it is because she said so that good things are happening to me, not because I understand something.
Rania, min tummek lebab as-samai.
Tummek lebab as-sama. From your teeth, from your mouth to the door of the sky, if we translate it literally. So it is when you say things that things happens, good things or bad things. And even I have to say poetry because it is divided onto two big parts. When you wish, when it's, let's say the good part, when you're talking about your girlfriend, when you're talking about yourself, your own country and so on, and the bad side, when you're telling bad things about people. And it is because of this, because you want things to happen and you just need to say it. And before this, even God, when he wanted to create Christ is word. And for Muslims, when God wanted to create the earth and the universe, he said, kun fayakun, he said, be, and it happens. So the words And language in Semitic civilization, it is not only things that we say, it is something that happens and acts. And it is very important, I think, to know, to understand this kind of text, why it say, with your own spells I have called you.
Right. I mean, and this is always sending back. Thank you, Anya. I'm going to carry on a little bit so we can get through. Okay. Thank you. Martina, the Harashta Banausi, the Banausi, and Nausi is temples. Horvi, ruined temples. Sharia, who dwells in ruined temples. Sharia wa Shachva, Umukra, Ushiryani, Digirme, Udburki, the Bene Nashi, Gatla. And she cuts off. Gatil is to cut off as well as to kill. Katle kane, gama. Girmi, okay, mukra, which is the marrow, ushiriane, the girmi, of the bones, or the burki. And this is strange, it means the knees, but it may mean something else. I am puzzled by this because we don't have, I haven't found another place where it means some kind of other kind of bone, perhaps. Maybe large bones, I don't know. Anasha gatla umalakta, and she gathers up. Lagat is like laqat, or in Babylonian Aramaic also naqat. And we have naqat also in the Mandaic epigraphic text. We don't have it in the classical Mandaic text, but we do have it in the epigraphic corpus, naqat for laqat. So she cuts off these bones, the bodies, and she gathers them. Wa akhla, and she eats. Then, now we have the adjuration. Mashba'na lach, I adjure you from Shin Bet Ayin. I make you take an oath. Umalmina lach, and I make you take an oath. Libai dewa, oh libai, the dev. And dev is Persian, the same word as deus, etymologically, but in Persian, they're not gods, they are demons. Bra the Imba Litha, the son of Imba the Lilith, and we have many, many Liliths here, lots of goddesses, Liliths. Mashbana lach, umamena lach, Asai diwa, lach, Azdan diwa, the Alitzlon, and Alitz is Alatz, Alitz, Aleph Lam Tzadi, Alitz, were oppressors. And the Rahsalon is an unusual word. It's the first time it was occurred in this text. It seems to be Rahasu in Akkadian, which is to tread upon. Seems to be cognate with an Akkadian word. It's not found elsewhere in Aramaic because we have to oppress and to tread upon. And they appear together in magic texts in Akkadian. Whether it's a loan word, whether it's cognate, it's not clear. We don't have enough context and enough knowledge. I stress again, Mandaic, like Jewish Babylonian Aramaic, it's not a direct descendant from the Aramaic dialects that we have from the Persian period. These dialects existed separately, and they suddenly appear in southern Babylonia in a relatively late period. We don't know anything about, we know almost nothing about their prehistory, and therefore we don't really know always whether words have been borrowed from another language, whether they're part of their vocabulary. If it's common Aramaic, then obviously it's less likely that they've been borrowed from another language. If we find a word that's found only in Akkadian and in these dialects, maybe they're simply words that survived in a certain area and didn't survive elsewhere. Okay, and appears to them. Those are the dev. So we now have a series of adjurations, which is making the demons swear to you that they will do what you want. And here again, you see, you don't see because it's in the brackets. Okay, to young men, this is like dardak. Bedardaquton, in their youth. Wa'limane, and young men, and this is ulema in classical Aramaic. Young men, bilumuton. Now these reconstructions here are certain because the text repeats itself below. And this is the case where, because I've got more text, I've got another version of this text, in this case in the same textual witness, I'm able to reconstruct what's missing here. But there are cases where I don't, and I don't have the formula elsewhere, so I don't know what's written. I can't just make it up. The reconstructions here aren't just made up, they're based upon what we will see later. What iftuli, and this is betulim, virile young men, virgins, biftulon in their virginity, uftulata, and virgin girls, nubile virgins. So what is biftuli? If we have biftulon, what is biftul in their virginity for the males? What is for the feminine? What is the E at the end?
Hin.
Lehi.
Exactly. Biftulhi or biftulaihi. In Babylon, it could be either. In Babylonian, it could be biftulhin, biftulaihin. So again, this is not simply the plural, this is the pronominal ending. In their virginity. We have biftulon, biftuli. And again, I know that the text is the feminine plural because we'll see it down here. Okay, it's here again. So until this text was discovered, it wasn't discovered, was interpreted, happened to be by me in this case, which is one of the reasons I'm showing you. But until this text was found, we didn't have these grammatical forms. They only know about them because new material has enlightened our understanding of the language and enriched our knowledge of the language. I often have this question when I'm working on material. To what extent are our new discoveries because we are just clever and we look at things and we understand things people didn't understand before? And to what extent is it new discoveries that allow us to understand the text better? In many cases, it's new discoveries, even if it's not this text that I've discovered, even if it's a different text that I've read that wasn't previously available. Sometimes by reading other texts, I suddenly understand the text I'm reading now. So it's the cumulative effect of lots of new evidence and reading that evidence and remembering it, if you can, that helps you to interpret these materials and gives you the advantage. Okay, let's continue. Biftuli u'elasavi b'sivuthon. And sivuthon is their old age. Now, a number of these words were not previously known in Mandaic. They're not necessarily difficult words. They just weren't attested. So Alimutha, I don't think was Ulimutha was not attested. I don't believe Saivutha was attested. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and check the databases. But because we're constantly working with the Comprehensive Aramaic Lexicon on digitizing these materials and incorporating them, first of all, we very quickly discover when there's a new word because we don't have a lexical entry for it. And secondly, we very quickly make it available because it is incorporated into the Comprehensive Aramaic Lexicon. So for example, about a month and a half ago, the Adi Ardeni Memorial Volume, which I edited, appeared. It contains several new texts in Mandaic, which I published and Noad published. They are now already in the Comprehensive Aramaic Lexicon, and all the words that they contain are available in the searches of the Comprehensive Aramaic Lexicon. So the advantage of digital lexicography is that you can update it immediately as soon as new material becomes available. I say immediately, it was within a month or so that the material was available. It's certainly quicker than waiting 100 years for a new dictionary to be written. I know that some people for 100 years, that's not a long time, but I don't have 100 years to spare. Okay. Mashaban alach, umamin alach, ledilach, nirig. Text seems to read dirig. It could possibly read nirig again, nun yod resh yod gimel. If it is dirig, it's nirig deraig. Nirig, who desires. And we often find they will add these epithets that are wordplay on the name of the god, the demons. Nerig Daraig, Nerig who's desirous. Diwa, and here we have another one. He's Nerig, Diwa Daragillon Livnei Anasha. That fetters, Ragil, the root is the Ragil, to tie the feet. So he's Nerig Daraig, Diwa Daragil, Livnei Anasha, who binds the feet of men, of people. So we have a number of word plays on this name. The name of Nerig, Nergal, is ancient, but the folk etymologies or the explanations of his name are sometimes specifically Mandean. Ledar the Kune, Ledar the Kuton, for infants in their infancy, Ilmani, Ilimuton, Liftuli, Biftulon, and Liftulata, Biftuli. And again, we have this repetition. As I said to you, when I reconstructed the text above, it's because I have the text here. The formula repeats itself. So it could be that this formula, not this particular one, that I will have a text that's broken. And I showed you there are big holes in this manuscript, in this lamella. It could be that I'll find another copy of it, and this has happened in some of the texts that we've published, where the other copy is also very damaged, but the sentences happen to be damaged in different parts. And so we can join the evidence of the different textual witnesses to this formula to help us reconstruct what it is. This is why, for example, the magic texts are much easier than inscriptions. And this is something that my teacher Nave actually wrote. He said that you have to understand that you have to accept that there are some inscriptions that will never be able to be read. Somebody wrote something on the wall of a cave 2,000 years ago. There's only one copy of it, and there will never be another copy of it. And if you can't read it, instead of pretending you can read it, you have to say, I don't know what this means. We always say when we're publishing these texts, I always write in every article, because it's what I believe, that I hope that additional copies, parallels will be discovered that will help us to understand the parts of the text that I was not able to understand. So that is part of the work of dealing with these texts, which is also why digital editions are so important, because it could be that tomorrow we'll find something will come onto the market, or somebody will find in a collection another copy of this, and I'll be able to improve the readings and editions of this text. So we carried on where we were, Ulasavi, Lesevuthon. So this Nirig is also attacking all of the people, and you notice that it's people of all ages. Young people, children, it's little children, young people, people of child age, Bethuli, Bethulatha, and old people. What's missing? Adults. Adults who've had children, but unless you say that Bethulatha just means childbearing age. Somebody once said that this is possible. So it could just mean people of childbearing age and not necessarily virgins. Could be nubile rather than, and virile rather than actual virgins, because we notice that this age group is missing. And old people. So it's like young and old. Umalminalach Kayoma Diva. And Kayoma means the one who's standing, the enduring, but it's the name of a dev here. The Kudamai Afi, Umalminalach, Inbati, and these are very strange names that I have no explanation for. That's the names that appear. Demin Bathrai Afi, Ule Imbraki Diwa, Demin Bathrai, Umin Train Gisai Afi, Gisa, side. We will see this again in what follows, because we have two forms of this word in this text. And you notice here, the text is getting more difficult. If I take you back to the photographs one moment. We're now here. You see? That says Lilitha. No, it doesn't. Le'elimani. So it says Le'elimani biftuli. Bet, pei, vav, taf, vav, lamed, yod. Here. Can you see the mouse? Do you see the mouse moving?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. This is Savi, this is Vuthon. So you can see why the text now is getting a little bit more difficult, because it's simply rotted away, it's corroded away. So I am of the minimalist school in publishing texts. I do not like massive reconstructions. I don't like speculative reconstructions. I think that if you can't read something, you don't read it. You produce the edition as it is, and you say, I hope that we'll find another parallel. I think it's misleading to try to create readings where they don't exist. So if I can't understand something or I can't read it, I'll simply say, I can't read it. And we'll move on to the next one. And that will be more readable. And then, as I said, it's possible that suddenly we'll find another copy and then we'll be able to improve this. I don't make any claim that this is the final version of this text. Certainly the bits that are missing, if we found another copy of this, we're always hoping every time we find something comes onto the market or somebody says, I've got a Mandek Lamella, we always hope it's going to be something new or a better copy of something that we have. And usually, unfortunately, it isn't. Usually it's another copy of something that we know well. But and one of the reasons I chose the text that I published in the Adeni volume specifically was because they were all new. They were all new texts. And I thought, well, if I publish the new texts, then if somebody else has a copy of that, maybe they can then read it better, because that will make it more available to them. But to publish another copy of something that we know well didn't seem to me to be so productive. And it says tun, and I don't know what tun is. You, probably the second person plural ending, but I don't know if it's a verb. I don't know if it's a pronoun. Antun, I don't know. Anatun. Kez is when. Ana, I don't know what it is. Lia, don't know what it is. Liana. Torre, Pkatha, I know what that is. That's Torre is mountains. Pkatha is valleys. Waramatha and heights. Pegathe le Kayoma. I met Kayoma. And you remember Pagat from yesterday. Ima b'meriai tifga. Okay, we're going to have to stop here. So tomorrow we shall continue to read this text, and then we'll get to all the really exciting bits. And if you, those of you who read Hebrew, can compare the edition here to what we did in Hebrew, and you'll see where I've tacitly corrected or changed the interpretation based on how I understood it when I came to reread it. Okay, so bis morgens, we say. See you all tomorrow. Now, one last thing. You can write to my email. I'll give it to you again. Here we go. I'll give it to you again. You'll need to take it, and before we shut the meeting. No, it's not giving it to you. And today it may even work. It's not moving into English. Wait a sec. Today the university servers may actually be working. You got it? Metzoyan.